this way a little.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I start?
Sure.
Well, welcome, YouTube lovers. I'm your host and narrator, Daniel Stern, and we are pleased to take you for a special behind the scenes story of a blockbuster movie that was transformed into a magnificent behind the scenes feature of World War I. In the late 1930s through the earliest of 1941, Jerry Bruckheimer and his team created a spectacular motion picture that was based on a true story of World War I.
Scary.
It was a magnificent challenge for Jerry Bruckheimer to make an epic film in the earliest of the 1900s. To start off our behind the scenes story is producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who had the golden opportunity to produce such a mega hit blockbuster in the earliest of 1947. So here to start out our behind the scenes documentary is producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who will tell you how his last two films, such as Armageddon and Pearl Harbor, was inspired to make this newest blockbuster hit, World War I, to the screen in the late 1960s. So here is Jerry Bruckheimer.
Well, it's great to be back on your show. I am honored to be here.
Daniel Stern.
Well, of course, everybody knows it's Daniel Stern. I mean, anyone watching this, they're watching because you're famous and you put on such high quality performances on YouTube. So Daniel Stern, yes. I, Jerry Bruckheimer, am proud to be in your company. Well, as you started off telling the story, the whole concept of doing a movie about World War I did start in the late 1930s and into the early 1940s, and that's because Adolf Hitler and the Germans were gearing up for World War II. They hadn't learned their lesson regarding World War I, and here we go again. We thought World War I would be the end of all world wars, but oh no. The Nazis came to power, and they thought they were a superhuman race, and that they were going to take over the entire world. And so that was part of the inspiration. As you also said, my earlier movies, Armageddon and
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, yes. Well, Pearl Harbor, I had really a vision of what was going to happen in the future, and ironically, I nailed it. I got it right. So when we filmed Pearl Harbor in 1928, the attack on Pearl Harbor hadn't even occurred. But Armageddon, kind of has a Vietnam theme. Vietnam hadn't come along yet either. So I was really ahead of my times, and the rest is sort of history. Wait until you see the movie.
In the late 1952 through the earliest of 1951, director director Ron Howard, played by my dad, helped Jerry Bruckheimer make this film that was based on a true story in the earliest of the 1500s. And it was sort of appealing to Ron Howard because, unlike so many young directors such as Michael Bay and Gore Verbinski, was an interesting task in the earliest of the 1300s. Here to talk about some of the scenes in the movie that were never before seen by the public. Here is Ron Howard, played by my dad again, to tell you his goal in making World War I a special movie that was based on a true story. Ron?
Oh, it is so good to be back on your show. I am just delighted to be here, and hello, audience. I know that you're delighted to be here as well. Yes, working with Jerry Bruckheimer was like a dream come true for me. As a director, you know, I've had some marginal successes in my career, but the opportunity to direct World War I with Jerry Bruckheimer when World War II was about to break out, it was probably the biggest challenge of my professional career, but also the greatest opportunity. And then you made mention of what was going on in the early 1500s, and then you even went back to the 1300s. Well, I want to tell you that that didn't have a lot to do with World War I, other than there were wars that far back in time where you would think that man would learn from his mistakes and that really no one really benefits from wars. But alas, was not the case. And so we filmed World War I, and I must say, I think it's my best directing achievement of my career. Now, I did want to remind you that there is a time limit on YouTube. And so we probably ought to be about ready to wrap this up.
Oh, the narrator and host would like to mention one more thing
Okay, let's hear it.
before we put this thing on YouTube. During the late of 1921 through the earliest of the 1961, co-producer James Jacks, played by my dad again, will explain some of the voice casting for some of the characters in this next blockbuster hit, World War I, and how these characters were inspired to make this blockbuster hit a reality. So here's James Jacks, played by my dad, to tell you who Ron Howard cast for the soldiers who fought in World War I and he'll explain some of the voice casting. James Jacks, you get the final word on this behind the scenes documentary. So go ahead.
All right. We'll keep this quick because we are running overtime.
Yes.
First of all, for G.I. Joe, none other than Burt Lancaster.
Burt Lancaster.
Right. Playing the evil G.I. Joe equivalent from the Nazi army. Of course, it wasn't the Nazis then, but from the German army, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Those were the two lead actors. Most of the dialogue involved one of them in every scene, and I thought that Ron Howard did brilliantly to select them.
Well, I like to thank you, young audience, for watching this behind-the-scenes documentary of Jerry Bruckheimer and Ron Howard's new blockbuster film, World War I. And join us next time as we take you for another behind-the-scenes documentary of Jerry Bruckheimer's newest hit movie, World War II. So don't miss out.
The sequel.
So thank you and goodbye.
And let's hope there's not a World War III. Thank you, thank you. What a great show!